What about Regent Cox?
Pam, he was tentative, so I'm not sure if he's going to be able to make the call or not.
Okay, and it looks like Regent Green cannot make it.
No, she is on vacation this week.
Okay. And Regent Rabinowitz? All right, I think we're ready to begin then. If the chair could
All right.
open.
Yes. Call the meeting to order. Please call the roll, please.
And if as many members as possible can please put their cameras on if you are able to. Chair Stevens.
Aye.
Vice Chair Martin, has he arrived? Secretary Fletcher.
President Beckman.
Regent Bogard.
Aye.
Regent Cox. Regent Finan.
Here.
Regent Girdler.
Here.
Regent Hamilton. Regent Herdink.
Here.
Regent Jackson.
Here.
Regent Rabinowitz. Regent Smith.
Here.
And Regent Witten.
Here.
All right, we can proceed. We do have a quorum.
Thank you.
Pam, may I say that Keith Hamilton plans to join shortly. He is finishing a meeting.
All right. We'll report for the record when he arrives. Thank you.
Pam, before we get started, your volume, maybe it's just me, but your volume, it was okay, and now it seems like a little low.
Okay, let me. Is that any better?
Weak.
All right, how about that?
That's better.
Oh,
That's better.
Better.
All right, I'll just try to turn myself up here and see if you can hear me. I'm
Yes,
sorry, I am at home today. I had a mediation and just came straight from there.
okay.
All
The
right,
next,
Chair Stevens.
right. The next item is approval of the minutes of April the 18th. Do you hear a motion? We approve them?
Regent Fletcher.
Is he frozen?
Second.
All right,
Second
motion.
by Regent Herdink.
So by consensus, Pam, we can raise our hands.
Chair Stevens, can you hear us?
Yes, ma'am.
Regent Girdler,
Regent Fletcher's hand is up.
Okay, I believe that Pam may be having some computer problems, but that looked like a consensus by show of hands for approval of the meeting minutes. And Chair Stevens, next item.
Is the Huron progress report. Pam or Hannah or Huron, somebody.
I am back. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes.
I have changed computers. So here we go. The Huron progress report. Please know that Huron has provided a report that consists of 241 pages. That report, while the findings or the opportunities are not all about, are not all 241 pages, the appendices included create a document that is that long. So basically what they have done is to go through and identify, based on the data that we provided, that the opportunities for cost savings throughout the system. At that point, Huron provided these in a secured SharePoint restricted site, which means that they can only be made available and they cannot be downloaded. Now, the PLT saw this presentation last week. They have had an opportunity to discuss it, to review it, to ask questions. The next step is for them to indicate what their priorities would be based on the 40-some recommendations or opportunities that Huron provided. Once that occurs, they're kind of on hold until the board does the exact same thing with the exact same presentation. So that presentation will be provided to the board. Huron will go through it. They will discuss the opportunities, discuss why they feel these are good opportunities. They will, as they indicate on their slides, give you the case for change, which means they will document why they believe this is a justifiable change. They categorize those changes into strategic, which means they might be very long-term and they might be kind of game changers for the entire strategic plan of the institution, of the system. But they also have kind of low impact but high yield type of opportunities. And they also have medium service level opportunities. So there will be a lot of different categories that you will look at. Then they will go through them with you and they will ask you to do the same thing that the PLT did, which was to determine what are your top 7 to 10 priorities. Now, as you do that, we will move even closer to the June 5th and June 6th dates, whereby you will be coming together as a board with the PLT to discuss from their administrative standpoint and your governance standpoint what will be the top 7 to 10 priorities that the system would like to move through. Now, just because you are identifying 7 to 10 priorities does not mean that the rest, the 30 other opportunities, just go by the wayside. Those opportunities are then determined later on what you will move to. But again, if you have 40 priorities, then nothing really will be a priority. So there will be things that are instrumental in being able to implement these particular priorities, such as a project management team. There will be things about capital projects. There will be things about academic programs. All of those work streams will be identified, and then also the opportunities will be beneath each one of those work streams. Now, it's going to be a lot of work because once you identify those priorities, you don't just sit back and say, well, our work is done, because Huron then comes and works with you and the administration to roadmap those priorities. And road mapping means that they will take from cradle to grave how to implement and market and create that change. So in that roadmap, you will go through all of that together and figure out how is the best way to get to that change. And that will be June 5th and 6th for priorities. And then the following week, around June 15th, the road mapping will begin. So that's the high level process look. The opportunities, we've tried to not necessarily discuss them in open meetings because those opportunities have to be vetted, and your opportunities may not be the same priorities as anyone else's. So please know that everything will be looked at. Regent Finan.
Pam, just to clarify, so we will be looking at this for the first time June 5th. Is that correct? And
well, I believe that it will be too much for you to look at it and digest it and create priorities. So tomorrow I have a check-in with Huron, and we'll be going over the timeline for you to be getting the documents, because 241 pages is way too much for anyone to digest. So I foresee that you will get it, look at it. It will be in that same restricted format where it will be view only.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? I know this isn't exactly an update. It's just kind of telling you where we are. But again, we're getting down to the fine tuning of these priorities. So I think you will appreciate being able to look at the data that was collected. There's a lot of it. I will also tell you that we're working with CPE to get them the same kind of data in an embargoed format, a restricted format. And we are trying to make sure that we are starting the HR analysis that we talked about, the HR review of policies, and the compensation and classification stream continues on as well. So, Chair Stevens.
Yes, ma'am. In reference to those 260 some odd pages, will there be a briefing of those and I use the term my college day, the cliff notes? Will we have the cliff notes so that if we have their highlights and if we want to refer back to them, that's fine. But so that's my question. Are we going to have a summary of their highlights and recommendations?
So we have not yet talked to Huron about that, but we did talk about it in cabinet to determine whether that would be something that is helpful. So tomorrow when I check in with Huron, I will talk to them about the possibility of doing an executive summary. But I do think it's really important for people to have all of the information. I would not want anyone to believe that we were kind of culling information to give to you in a manner that we wanted it to be presented. So I do want Huron to be the ones who are in charge of that information and how it is presented to the board and to any other constituencies.
Can I ask you a question, General Counsel?
Yes.
So whose decision was it that the board would not have the first look at this report that we requested?
So it was a mutual decision between Huron and the executive sponsors, including me. The fact of the matter was that it was more logistical than anything because of their schedules. They map out with all of their clients where they can be, when they can be, etc. But I will tell you, Regent Fletcher, that when asked who has the governance decisions, it has always been very clear to Huron that the governance body is the board. So I can assure you that any changes that needed to be made or tweaks that needed to be made were merely were very small and were noted as to, for instance, this data didn't reflect a particular program or something like that. But all of the opportunities and all of the data will be exactly what was presented to the PLT, and it will be coming to you within likely a week from now.
Okay. I do want the whole report, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, and you will get that. So I see two hands. I think Liaison Rivera's hand was first, and then Regent Herding.
Just a quick comment. I know that 242 pages sounds a little daunting, but it really is a simple, easy read. There are lots of graphs and high-level pictures, for lack of a better word. So don't think that you're going to have to sit down and read a thesis on this. It really is kind of a quick, you can glance at it and glean what you need to from it. But we will do our best to get it to you as soon as Huron gives the okay. We will send it your way.
And Regent Herding.
Yeah, I just want to speak on what Wendy or Regent Fletcher was saying as well. Since the cabinet and PLT had the report first, and you said there are some minor changes and tweaks and notes were made from the original. Will we have access to those notes and those changes as if we, here's the original one, here are the notes and changes that were made prior to us seeing it in that document?
Yeah, certainly I can ask Huron to note what they were. They have provided two different reports, the original one and the one based on PLT comments. But I can tell you, having sat through all of those meetings and looked at both reports, that the tweaks were extremely, extremely minor. But we can provide kind of a rundown of what those tweaks were. So, for instance, there was one request to have, I think, a footnote or some sort of comment about community use of space. So it's very minor things. And certainly I would caution all of the regents and all of the PLT that these are opportunities, not necessarily recommendations. And there might be, you might as a regent go through, and PLT might go through the data and say, wait a minute, what about the data is showing me this? Can you explain this, Huron? And so it is incumbent upon PLT and the board to not necessarily only look at the data, but to, the slides that make the set forth the opportunities, but to really look at the data and what it reflects. Because I will say this, as I said earlier, CPE will be getting all of that data, and CPE will be giving that data a look. And they will also be providing the document or the study that goes to the legislature to support their findings for Senate Joint Resolution 98. So if you don't know what that data is, or you haven't taken the time to read behind the opportunities and to look at the data, and I don't expect everyone to be statisticians, so I will say that very slowly. But I do say to you, again, what I said to you in my very first meeting with you, that it is your fiscal duty and your duty of loyalty to always be looking at all things and asking all questions. And so if you have a question about the data, do not feel like it is a bothersome question. It is something that we will pass directly on to Huron and pass directly back to you.
Awesome, great. I just want to make sure that any changes are
the data.
Go ahead, sorry.
Regent Herding and
sorry,
then Regent Fletcher.
I appreciate that. I understand that the data will need to be looked at and everyone needs to do their due diligence. I just want to make sure there's no rumors of massaging or filtering and stuff like that. As my staff role, I want to make sure I do my due diligence and read through everything, including all the notes.
Right.
Change.
And as your parliamentarian and your general counsel and the executive project manager on this, I will tell you that I would ensure that nothing like that would happen.
So since the data is so sensitive, it sounds, and we're going to be given the opportunity to look at it before the retreat, if we do have questions, how do you want those questions to come back to you?
So what
are we
I
referencing pages or paragraphs, or are we just noting things as confidential in emails? How do you want that data? If we have
So
questions?
what I have asked the PLT to do is to send it through me, and then I send it on with you copied so that you know there is no intermediary message going, in between. So what you should do is to send it to me. I'd copy Hannah just in case, because I've got a lot of stuff coming through right now. But then I send it on to Veronica with whoever asked the question copied. And then they send it back. And if they want to engage with you one-on-one, then they have the opportunity to do that as well. Regent Herding.
Sorry, me again. When we do have questions, I know they always come up. I always have a ton of questions. Could we ask that if other regents have questions that they be shared with the whole of the board, just to make they might be on the same track of mind that I am on. So
absolutely. And what I would suggest is that once we have these questions flowing in, that we compile them into one document and send them. So it might be even a living document that would add as it goes. Okay, any other questions about the Huron project? And like I said, as soon as we're ready to share that, Huron is ready to share all that documentation with you, we will get that SharePoint site set up. You will not be able to download it. You will not be able to manipulate it in any way, and neither has the PLT been able to. So it will have restricted access. So if you need, for some reason, some sort of accessibility, you have an accessibility issue that you need it in a different manner, then you need to contact me and Liaison Rivera. All right. Seeing no other questions, I give it up to the next agenda item.
The presidential search update, Brianna.
Yes, that would be me. So I'll keep it short and sweet, but definitely want to make sure that any other questions from the full board are answered. So we met and there were several things for discussion that we wanted to make sure we covered prior to our next meeting with the consultants. And that is 526, correct, Hannah? Is that
correct?
Right?
Yes.
Okay. So we discussed the doctorate requirement staying in place, being required and not preferred. And we did agree as a committee to leave that in place. And then there are some other housekeeping issues that I know that Miss Amy Jennings is already on. She has sent out the signing of the confidentiality agreements that we as a committee must adhere to. And General Counsel went over, what is expected of us in the way of that. And then, of course, reviewing our charge and the charge that we have in the selection process. So as far, am I missing anything? I feel like those are the big high points. But please feel free to, something of note.
That we're going to stick with the timeline. We're going to stick with the timeline that the consultants recommended, because that's going to give them adequate time to do a thorough search and us an adequate timeline to be able to review the candidates.
That's correct. That's correct. There was some questions that Chair Stevens had asked about the timeline. I know that Hannah was going to work to speak to AGB about that, but at this point, I think the timeline was just going to stand as noted and as it has been circulated among us. Is that correct?
Yes, the timeline that we were presented with by the consultants, I don't want anyone to take it as it's written in stone. Of course, with any search, you need to have some flexibility. There was talk at the previous meeting about the finalist choosing, which will have to be done by the full board, of course. That date comes after the September board meeting and would require another meeting the following week. I know that's not ideal. And I think it was suggested that perhaps we move the quarterly meeting and have the presidential final search and the finalist on site during the quarterly meeting to handle that. Right now, I just don't think that we could agree to that until we speak with the consultants and see how this plays out. I know that everyone, schedules that quarterly meeting up to a year in advance. So I don't want to move things around unless we absolutely had to. But I also know that Chair Stevens is very excited to get this search. And so we will move as quickly as possible, understanding that the consultants really need some time to do their work and do their due diligence. And we will remain as flexible as possible.
Thank you, Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
Chair Stevens, that's all I've got, unless you'd add more.
No, ma'am. That's a good report. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next agenda item, Pam.
Oh, you're on mute. Oh, still on mute.
You're on mute, Pam.
Okay.
I am so sorry. So sorry. So this is the ratification of procedure for establishing quorum and voting. This was supposed to have been voted on in the March meeting, but because we had so much going on. But basically, in reviewing the statutory requirements needed to establish the procedure for quorum and for voting, etc. And also with our new bylaws, it requires the board to come up with a particular process for actual voting and quorum. So this procedure is all about that. And it's been on the work site, the board's electronic work site, for probably half a year now. So I think it's time for us to go ahead and ratify these procedures. They were looked at and sort of nominally approved. And so we're just going to try and go ahead and get the full board to take a look at them and vote on them. Are there any questions about them? Okay, if we could have a motion and a second, then we can do a roll call vote on these.
So moved.
Second.
All right, and our roll call, Chair Stevens.
Aye.
Secretary Fletcher.
Aye.
Regent Bogard.
Aye.
Regent Finan.
Yes.
Regent Girdler.
Aye.
Regent Green is not here. Regent Hamilton, has he arrived? Regent Herdink.
Aye.
Regent Jackson.
Aye.
Regent Smith.
Aye.
Regent Whitten.
Aye.
Of the members present, the vote is unanimous. The motion carries and the procedure is now in place.
Have we had some members, Pam, to join us? Mine is showing that Kelly has she joined us?
I'm
here. I just don't have my video on. I'm in a call.
Okay, so yeah, I just want to make sure that everybody so gets the roll call. Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, Regent Rabinowitz, if you are present and would like to vote, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. So of the members present, the vote is still unanimous and the motion carries.
Thank you. All right, we'll wait for Pam or Hannah to put up the next item and then.
Well, it's your favorite part.
That's your favorite one.
Yeah, the one I've had. All right. Do I hear a motion that we adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second.
And by
All those-
consensus.
All those in favor, raise their hand. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.